You want me to do the acknowledgement, Christina, or are you saying anything? You want me to start?
Yes, please. I thought, Tracy, you will be doing the acknowledgement. Sorry.
No. So if we can just pause before we start our...
I'll start the recording. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So before we continue on, we want to pause and feel our feet on the floor, which is connected to the earth, and to give acknowledgement for those who are within the Australian continent of the traditional owners, or more correctly, custodians of this land, who have a deep relationship with the land and the waters and all the people on, and a deep sense of obligation that was given to them thousands of years ago. They have continued that tradition of stewardship of all the land and the animal, all the life, including animals and plants and people who are on that land and their particular piece of land. So that's why there's many different Aboriginal cultures, because depending on what type of land they are living on, they had to adjust and find the way to take care of that. So we want to really give acknowledgement to their faithfulness to God's instructing them, and to being able to pass that on until the present day. So we thank the elders, past and present, and we pray and hope that it can be, culture can be regained, language can be regained, so we can share in it and learn how we also can be better stewards of the country that we are upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So,
You want me to do the acknowledgement, Christina, or are you saying anything? You want me to start?
yes, please. I thought, yes, thank you. Are we going to do the chant now? Read the words of the psalm? Siva?
I think he's going to play them.
Yeah.
Your mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the clouds. Your righteousness is Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world, and have ascended to the spiritual world. Oh my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Oh my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness, cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness, cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount.
So that was beautiful. Shall we get started with the readings? So Colin.
The mysteries of man's physical death and of his return have not been divulged and still remain unread. By the righteousness of God, were they to be revealed, they would evoke such fear and sorrow that some would perish, while others would be so filled with gladness as to wish for death, and beseech with unceasing longing the one true God, exalted be his glory, to hasten their end. Death proffereth unto every confident believer the cup that is life indeed. It bestoweth joy and is the bearer of gladness. It conferreth the gift of everlasting life. As to those that have tasted of the fruit of man's earthly existence, which is the recognition of the one true God, exalted be his glory, their life hereafter is such as we are unable to describe. The knowledge thereof is with God alone, the Lord of all worlds. Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. The second reading.
Blessed is the soul which at the hour of its separation from the body is sanctified from the vain imaginings of the peoples of the world. Such a soul liveth and moveth in accordance with the will of its Creator, and entereth the all-highest paradise. The maids of heaven, inmates of the loftiest mansions, will circle around it, and the prophets of God and his chosen ones will seek its companionship. With them, that soul will freely converse and will recount unto them that which it hath been made to endure in the path of God, the Lord of all worlds. From Paula.
Lisa, reading 3.
And inasmuch as it has appointed for men to die once, and after this comes judgment. Hebrews 9:27. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. The Corinthians 5:10. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:7-14.
You? Thanks, Lisa. Sorry, Angela.
Okay. When it leaveth the body, however, it will evince such ascendancy and reveal such influence as no force on earth can equal. Every pure, every refined and sanctified soul will be endowed with tremendous power and shall rejoice with exceeding gladness. Thou hast, moreover, asked me concerning the state of the soul after its separation from the body. Know thou of a truth, that if the soul of man hath walked in the ways of God, it will assuredly return and be gathered to the glory of the beloved. By the righteousness of God, it shall attain a station such as no pen can depict or tongue describe. The soul that hath remained faithful to the cause of God and stood unwaveringly firm in his path shall, after his ascension, be possessed of such power that all the worlds which the Almighty hath created can benefit through him. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. Young, I think it's on next.
When the human soul soareth out of this transient heap of dust and reset into the world of God, then veils will fall away and verities will come to light, and all things unknown before will be made clear and hidden truths be understood. Consider how being in the world of the womb was deaf of ear and blind of eyes and mute of tongue. How he was bereft of any perceptions at all. But once, out of that world of darkness, he passed into this world of light. Then his eyes saw, his ear heard, his tongue spoke. In the same way, once he had hastened away from this mortal place into the kingdom of God, then he will be born in the spirit. Then the eyes of his perception will open, the ear of his soul will hearken, and all the truths of which he was ignorant before will be made plain and clear. Abdul Baha.
Thank you. Ahmed, please.
Allah fully takes away the souls of the people at the time of their death, and of those who do not die in their sleep. Then he withholds those on whom he has decreed death, and sends others back up to an appointed term. Surely in this there are signs for people who ponder. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. Quran, verse 39. Every self will taste death. You will be paid your wages in full on the days of rising. Anyone who is distanced from the fire and admitted to the garden has triumphed. The life of this world is only the enjoyment of delusions. Quran, Surah of 3rd, verse 185. O soul that are at rest, return to your Lord, well pleased him. So enter among my servants and enter into my garden. Quran, Surah 89, verse 27 to 30.
Thank you. Next one's Barry, I think. 7.
Death is certain for one. I'm sorry, there's something on my screen. Death is certain for one who has been born, and rebirth is inevitable for one who has died. Therefore, you should not lament over the inevitable. Bhagavad Gita. Those who relinquish the body while remembering me at the moment of death will come to me. There is certainly no doubt about this. Whatever one remembers upon giving up the body at the time of death, O son of Kunti, one attains that state, being always absorbed in such contemplation of Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you. It's Minan next.
The mysteries of which man is heedless in this earthly world, those will be discovered in the heavenly world, and there will he be informed of the secret of truth. How much more will he recognize or discover persons with whom he had been associated? Undoubtedly, the holy souls who find the pure eye and are favored with insight will, in the kingdom of lights, be acquainted with all mysteries and will seek the bounty of witnessing the reality of every great soul. Then even they will manifestly behold the beauty of God in that world. Likewise, will they find all the friends of God, both those of the former and recent times, present in the heavenly assemblage.
Thank you. And our last reading, Tracy.
Create in me a pure heart, O my God, and renew a tranquil conscience within me. O my hope, through the Spirit of power, confirm thou me in thy cause. O my best beloved, and by the light of thy glory, reveal unto me thy path. O thou, the goal of my desire, through the power of thy transcendent might, lift me up unto the heaven of thy holiness. O source of my being, and by the breezes of thine eternity, gladden me. O thou who art my God, let thine everlasting melodies breathe tranquility on me. O my companion, and let the riches of thine ancient countenance deliver me from all except thee, O my master, and let the tidings of the revelation of thine incorruptible essence bring me joy. O thou who art the most manifest of the manifest and the most hidden of the hidden. Baha'i Scripture, a prayer by Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. Siva, are you going to play that?
One more music.
Thy name is my healing, oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise.
So thank you. And I think it's time for me to introduce our speaker. When Siva asked me to be MC today, I said yes, without even knowing who the speaker was. And when I found that our speaker was Angela Ambrosia, who has had a near-death experience, you can read her bio, but it was really interesting because I am very interested in the topic that she's going to talk about. I'll just read what's on the screen anyway. Angela Ambrosia is a healer, a movement and meditation teacher, and shares classes and workshops to help youth learn about self-acceptance, body awareness, and body confidence, with the intent of establishing a school for young and old to learn about love, self-acceptance, and enlightenment. In 2019, she had a near-death experience after going into a coma from an aggressive ovarian and uterine cancer. In the years since her recovery, Angela realized how she denied her own knowing that she was not going to die because she believed what the hospital and others thought was true. She is aware of how much we allow the power of others' beliefs to overshadow our own knowing, and encourages others to learn how to listen to your inner voice, while also inviting and creating spaces to share yourself with others and experience true connection. In her workbook, The Body of Love, the Amazon reference is there, she explores 10 steps to experience the energy body and the emotions of the self and transform the way you perceive your body. So I see her website is dancewithangela.com, and I'm really excited to hear what she has to say because we seem to have a very similar outlook to healing. So
Yes. Sorry, thanks, Christella. Yeah, it's funny how Siva seems to know how to pair people up.
For sure.
He's got those antennas. So thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to share this evening. I'm going to be using a PowerPoint, but most of what I'm sharing to my experience and in my life with my parents dying and then my near death, and they didn't make it, so I did. So I'm here to tell a little bit of their story and how it's changed me. I'm also going to give you tonight some references, and I created a PDF and Siva has put it in the group WhatsApp, I think. So if you can't get those links, I've given a few videos that are quite foundational in terms of science and research about near death. So that sounds counterintuitive. However, there is more and more interest in consciousness beyond the physical body. And there are I've got two researchers and another hospice nurse who's collating research. So there is quite extensive research now of people who've had near death and of also what happens in that steps towards our death. So those links are in the PDF. So today what I'm sharing about my death experience, it's also influenced by my teachers, which are my parents and my two spiritual teachers, Helen Barton and Sri Bhagavan. So I'm going to share a little bit about mum and dad and my other teachers. But most importantly, my teacher, Sri Bhagavan, really emphasizes that your experience and your beliefs are what will guide you in your journey around death and also your relationship to life and God. So anything that you want to, in the discussion, want to ask me about, it's really, really valuable because all of the researchers have said it's so important to talk about death. And that's my main summary of my whole journey. Talk about it. Share your fears. Our pandemic situation has such anxiety for our world. And now is the time to start talking and helping young people, old people, learn what death is for you. Could be different. Most of the researchers have found some similarities, which is very interesting. That's Dr. Peter Fenwick, and I've got his links in the PDF. And when you listen to Dr. Peter Fenwick, he's like mainstream science. He's a neuropsychiatrist and a neurophysiologist, and he's researched how much the psychology of the brain gives us this imagery and these fears, but also collective deathbed experiences, including not just the people dying, but their family members. And because my parents died when I was younger, 21, and then later when I was 29, many people have come to me and shared with me what happened when their parents died, because it's very traumatizing when your parents die and it's very hard to verbalize. In fact, when Siva connected with me, he found me on Nextdoor. It's an app. And I had put in some information because this other beautiful woman, Lisa, had started a discussion. She had a near-death experience. And Lisa had allowed me to get rid of some of my feelings about my near-death experience. And then that's how Siva found me. So just because of Lisa, this woman I didn't know, she had started a conversation. It got me to move some of that energy. And then Siva also found me. So talking is very, very powerful in these times online to help people process death. So I wanted to show a very important, I'm going to start screen sharing and see how I go with this technology piece. PowerPoint, hello. Okay, here we go. So when I started looking into spiritual work, a lot of the people that started, not just when near death, but they talked about the source of life, or people in New Age community talks about the source. So many people, when they cross over, they talk about this beautiful light experience, okay, this great light. They talk about a tunnel, and Dr. Peter Fenwick, he gathered lots of information, more so from Western countries, where people talk about in their near death, they go through and they get a tunnel and they see great, beautiful light. And this beautiful light also has come to me through my spiritual work. So this light, this picture here comes from my teacher, Sri Bhagavan in India. I can talk to you about that in another talk, but I'm just going to say that this light is basically what a lot of people who have near-death experience. And we'll come back to that because it's very significant, because I knew about this before my near-death experience. I had been taught about this, and I didn't have that when I died, almost died, or started trying to die. So my first teacher is about death and, well, about many things, is Mum. So in 1992, my mum died of cancer. It was pretty aggressive to hers. And I was 21, I was pretty traumatized. And one night, when you're dealing with death and you're, especially mum or dad dying, you go into these states where you're just crazy. So one of the nurses just came to me and just started sharing from her heart how her life was because of being a nurse. I basically asked her, how can you do this? And she just opened her heart. She looked at me. There was this presence in her when she spoke that most of you, because you're spiritually connected, you know when someone's sharing directly from their heart, maybe even their soul. And she told me how much watching people dying made her feel her life was potent and meaningful, and that she had learned so much every night when she was there with people. We had one woman in the hospital, God bless Beryl. She was yelling and screaming swear words every night. And I used to watch the nurses just gracefully love this woman that was swearing at them. Don't touch me, get off me. And they just poured love on her. And those nurses, I don't know their names, but they changed me in that experience with Mum. And I've got a link of a video here from a hospice nurse in Texas, Martha Atkins, and you can have a look at what she shares about deathbed phenomena, where people start to feel this great sense of that beautiful light that I showed you before, that love that surrounds us, but we seem to run away from it in our conscious life, and then we sort of come back to it before death. So my second teacher in death was Dad. So 2000, Dad had cancer as well, and he died. But this time, unlike Mum, I was a little bit more aware of spiritual stuff. I'd seen a lot of weird things. I'd worked with a bit of mediumship and other stuff. And I was more connected, in a sense, to the other world. I was more ready to experience more. So Dad, he demonstrated really interesting stuff. One day, well, the last hours of his life, we were alone. The nurses abandoned us. We were in a room, and he didn't have a bed in the hospital, so it was just me and him. And I was holding him, and his bowel had perforated, and he was in excruciating pain. That's why the nurses were not really helping us, because there was nothing they could do. But I felt desperate. I was out of my league. So I tried holding him, and then his body started to lift up, which is what they describe sometimes in deathbed phenomena. The body starts to lift up, and he started reaching into space, and his eyes were looking into space, somewhere not physical. And Dr. Peter Fenwick talks about this. It's very common that you'll start to have your dying people seeing something that's not physical. And I could see Dad doing that. And in that moment, I knew that there was something else besides the physical world. Nobody had to tell me, because I saw my dad calling for Mother Mary. He never spoke to Mary in his conscious life. Here he was calling to Mary. So that night changed me. And in the morning, my other family members came. I was asleep when Dad passed. And then at 3:00 in the afternoon, I was sleeping because I'd been up all night. 10 people showed up at the hospital. None of them knew that the other people were coming. They all came separately and they surrounded Dad in a circle. And I have to look at you because it was amazing. This is another death, dying phenomena. People just random, and loved one stays alive for them to come. So they surround him in a circle. Dad was in a coma. He came up out of the coma, which was not possible in his physical state. And he just slowly looked at each of the person in their eyes to say goodbye. And then he passed. And there was no way that was physically possible. And it was such an amazing experience. Thankfully, my friend was there and could tell me, because I'd missed it. So I had the gift of his passing in that night. And then when I heard about his passing, I was like, there is something here that we just don't talk about. And it changed my life. And from that point, I started doing more spiritual work. So the next major thing was 3 months after Dad died, I met Helen. So Helen saved my life in many ways. Helen Barton is a spiritual mentor, and she has died 3 times and has gone down the tunnel, has met that beautiful white light. And each time they stopped her and said, no, you have to go back. And she's shared that in a video. I've got the link in the PDF if you want that, and you can watch about Helen. So she taught me about dying from her experience. And I also mentioned earlier, I've met many friends who also have shared their stories as well. So then next to my turn. So in 2019, 19 years after Dad died and 27 years after Mum, I ended up in the same hospital, the same driveway where I left my dad. That morning I left, the ambulance pulled up. I'm laughing because literally I'm in the ambulance. I'm on oxygen and I've got, my lungs are full of liquid because of this cancer, and I can hardly breathe. But I recognize that driveway from the last time I had been at that hospital was when I'd left my father. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is not good. So that day when I pulled up, I knew I had to face another layer of sadness about my parents dying, because it was so scary to be full of cancer that was so aggressive. My initial diagnosis was I had on the July 2nd, it's a little bit hazy because it was such a strong sickness. I had my right and left ovaries were 7 and 8 centimetres on July 2nd, I think. By July 25th, when I ended up at that hospital, they doubled. I had blood clots all over my lungs. My right lung was full of liquid and was just, they'd put in a drain, but the liquid was coming and coming and coming. Those ovaries had, and I had my cancer in my uterus as well. So the uterus and the ovaries were full of cancer, creating liquid. It's a syndrome when you have typically ovarian and uterine, but some other cancers create excessive fluids. And the other lung was slowly filling up more with liquid. So I was drowning, and the doctors looked at me like, oh my God, what, you're going to die. So before I went to hospital, I had done my intuitive work, and I had been told by my own guidance, you're not going to die. But when I pulled up in the ambulance right where I left Dad, and the doctors are looking at me like, oh my God, we can't operate on her. She's got blood clots in her lungs. We can't take the cancer out. They're just looking at me like, you're dying. They told my family as well. So my family were freaking out. And I lost, that's what I said in the beginning when Christella introduced me, I lost that knowing as soon as I entered the hospital, which was pretty normal because it's right where I left Dad and he didn't end up surviving. So it really was a very, very challenging time. And I really I had a few surgeries, but because they couldn't cut out the cancer, everything in my body was suffocating me. And if you think about the coronavirus, it's a similar death that some people are experiencing. The fluids get out of balance and they literally die in their own fluids that are out of balance. So it's quite a terrifying way to die because you feel like you're dying anyway. And you have to have support, which thank God I had tons of support, great doctors. But when the doctors were looking at me with that face, I lost faith in myself. So now to my actual experience of what it felt like when I was not here. I went unconscious around August someday, and I got lost in a phase. It's sort of hard to explain because I was so sick, so it's hard to remember. But I describe it here in this slide. It was like a haze, there were corridors, there were endless tunnels of meaninglessness. I was lost. Sometimes I remember something like that movie Stranger Things, if any of you have watched Stranger Things, and there's an alternate universe underneath our world. It was like that, and it was very miserable. And I'll just skip forward to this slide here because it describes in words what it was like I was smothered by the meaninglessness of my life, because here I was thinking, great, you get cancer and then you die. And that's my life. How meaningless is my life? And a few days was the length of time that I was unconscious. So it felt like that. Some people who have near-death experience say they have all of this stuff in a few minutes. Mine was I was out and I was lost in this meandering nothingness for a long time. Then after a few days, I remember finding these two figures in a corner, and it was like two guys playing cards, and I interrupted them. And they weren't really happy to see me. They were just sort of like, oh yeah, here she is. And then one of them said to me, what are you doing here? And in that moment, this is the next slide. I was like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, what am I doing here? It's not my time to die. But there was no romance. There was no beautiful white light. There was no feeling of divine love. I just knew I had to go back. I wasn't excited about returning, and I knew I wasn't allowed to die. It wasn't my time. And I knew I had to, in that moment, I knew all this stuff. I knew I had work to do. I had to set up the school for love and enlightenment, and I knew I had no choice. I had to do it. So not long after that, it felt like I came back into consciousness in ICU. I couldn't see. I had the intubator on my face, and my friend, her voice was there, and she was really happy. And she was telling me that while I was out, they operated on me and removed the cancer, and that I had responded well to the surgery. And she laughed. I remember her laugh. It was beautiful. And she was really happy, and I was happy to hear her voice. But I really had to face this past in the next 2 years, not right away, because when I came out, I was in ICU, I was on heaps of drugs. And I remember that voice, what are you doing here? And the lack of romanticness of the voice, like, you're not going to die, just go back. And a few days later, a friend of mine had a spiritual reading, and she actually confirmed that they did spiritually reject me. They called me a spiritual reject. They told me they didn't want me in the spirit world. And that was really good, because I was on so many drugs and still suffering from the liquid, from the cancer. And I very much remembered, what are you doing here? And I was thinking at that point in the ICU, I was like, great, no tunnel, no white light. Now I'm a spiritual reject. I've got a disabled body. And I was just laughing at the irony that I couldn't even die right. You know, everybody else gets a tunnel, and this is what I get. So one thing I realized was that my other teacher, who's Sri Bhagavan, taught me this before I died. He'd explained this to me, but I understood it in the following years after that experience. How you see life is how you perceive death. Sri Bhagavan says that when you die, you actually see what you think is the afterlife. And before I was unconscious like that, the people around me, they knew how angry I was. And my teacher from India had told me if I kept being angry, that I might not make it. And she didn't mean, now looking back, I knew she didn't mean that I would die, but I wouldn't recover as well. Because when I came back, I was severely disabled. I couldn't function. My body was so disoriented from all of the complications of that liquid. And over the last few years, I've realized after coming back that those thoughts about my life and how meaningless my life was were how I ended up experiencing death. That's all those corridors that went nowhere. And that when I came back, it was completely and only up to me to choose the way I wanted to see my life, to see it as a gift and a miracle. And it's very different when someone tells you, oh, focus on joy. Your life is a gift. But when I saw the misery and the suffering when I crossed over, and how unromantic when they said, what are you doing here? No, we don't want you. Go back. And I saw how I was making my life meaningless. That changed my perception. It was like, it's me. I had blamed God. I had made the cancer. I had made myself a victim. But it was actually my perception of life, my life, as meaningless. So then back to the thoughts about your life. And Sri Bhagavan's taught me a lot about this. Do you want to die and be with people you love? Most of us do. So that's what you get to see. Many people in the deathbed phenomena, they talk about these people even before they're dying. And people in near-death experience, they get to meet them. Do you want to die and experience greater states of heaven? Some of the readings we had tonight, I was crying because they talk about that. And if you want to experience that, then focus on that. What do you believe heaven or the afterlife is? Because that will inform what you're going to see. Whatever you believe, that's what you'll experience. And this is really important. Do you want to die and be punished? Because many people think they're a bad person, they should be punished. So that's what you end up seeing. Like me, I was like, my life's meaningless, so therefore I'm meaningless. And that's what I experienced. So be aware of your thoughts. With my death experience, I was not at peace. And I saw the hell that I had created just by my thoughts. So when I had to come back, I came back to my judgments and my beliefs about my life that I had created. No one else did that. That was me. It wasn't God, it was me. So during my illness, I also got this gift of seeing my guilt and anger and dismay for my parents. And that was incredible. That was such a gift. I got to literally, through my hospital period of 3 months, I was in bed thinking about them and going, they're okay. I need to be in charge of my life. Why am I carrying this about my parents? Why am I angry about them when I should be responsible for what I'm experiencing? And I saw through my meaningless death experience how I saw death, how I saw my life, and it was pretty boring. So I finally realized that if I want to see my life as meaningless, then that's how my life will be. And then in my recovery, and I've finished my recovery, I'm still at the end of it, but I've finished it to a large degree. My recovery, I realized if I want my life to be full of love or joy, then it will be. If I choose to focus on that, it's completely a choice. And it doesn't matter what the doctors say anymore. Now I go to my doctor and we sit and we laugh. It makes some of my family members angry that we just sit and chat, but he just thinks I'm a miracle. So we just go, this is great. Whatever you're doing, this is fantastic. And my other oncologist says, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because they call me a miracle. I shouldn't be here. And the joy is really a big, big piece about how we choose to focus on it. Because I work as a healer and a coach, and you can't tell people to focus on it if they don't feel it. But when you feel that your beliefs are creating your reality and have an experience of it, then you understand more deeply. And I feel strongly that death and talking about death, our fears about death, can help us change our perspective on life. So I have more information from Sri Bhagavan about death, but I want to finish with this and go into discussion. We need a new perspective on death in our world. Sri Bhagavan has said that during the pandemic and other world disasters that will have happened already in our world, if people die in a negative state, it's one of the worst things, not the only, but one of the worst things for humanity, because if they die in a negative state, that adds to our collective negative consciousness. And he's not alone, but he says we need to help people die at peace with themselves. And Sri Bhagavan works with this, the great compassionate light. He's not alone, though, in his call to us to help people die at peace with themselves. This is Dr. Peter Fenwick. I've got just a brief description on his work. I've got the links in the PDF. And he's explored everything I've shared with you today, the deathbed phenomena, people seeing this world and seeing another world, terminal lucidity, how they sit up like my dad did, how they look at people and people suddenly arrive before they're dying when that is not physically possible. And he's written the book, The Art of Dying. And he's from a scientific world. He's saying we need to talk about death and teach children and help people to understand the process of death from other people's experiences, because then we will be able to face it with joy and with a real peace that my spiritual teachers certainly have helped me to embrace. So I want you to just start that conversation if that's of something of value to you, and we can just jump into that right now. And also there's some other resources I have. There's another scientific research by Oliver Lazar. He's researching people who die. And then he works with two mediums and they find information about the person from the other side that they could never have got from the living members. So there are different researchers starting now. We have a global interest in near-death experiences because we do need a discussion and a community movement to understand how we, as a group, as a civilization, can get more peace around this anxiety and stop living with fear of death. So Sheldon Solomon, he's a teacher on death, and he shares how our society, not just with the coronavirus, but all times, when we are fearing death, we become more separated, more culturally phobic, more racist, more judgmental, more us and them, and more attacking because we're living in fear. So even if we just start allaying some of those things with a conversation about death, we can start to change that. And I'll stop there. There's a lot to process from what I've dumped on you, but I'd like to just open up to anybody who'd like to share.
So I might start off, because this has been a very fascinating topic for me, Angela. And I've been studying near-death experiences for a long time, since I lost my mother and brother. And I'm sure you mentioned Anita Moorjani, but have you read the work of Dr. Brian Weiss? I'm sure you have.
That's Life Between Lives, or he was with Oprah Winfrey, I think, and did a lot of past life regressions, I think.
He's got a few books out. The first one was Many Lives, Many Masters. And he's got a couple of after that, like Through Death into Healing, I think the title of the second one. So I've been also very interested in that field and watching a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. So it's great to meet someone who has actually had the experience. And it was really good to know. And it's really good that you're bringing this to the fore, because it's important that we talk about it and people, understand that there's more to life than life alone. And, and also Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I follow a lot, he has done a lot of research into how meditation assists with keeping people healthy. And in the last 2 years, he has assembled a panel of scientists, and they've actually got a free, in case anyone is interested, he's got a free webinar on his website called Evidence is the Loudest Voice. And it's about 3 hours, and they do all this brain mapping, and they've discovered that people who meditate regularly are less susceptible to illness, and they're even less susceptible to the coronavirus. So I think fear, as you said, is probably the worst thing. So, our work is quite similar, but I'll keep quiet now and ask others to ask questions, please.
I think Ahmed has raised his hand. You can see the hands raised.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela, for that nice talk. I'm sure healing and death experiences are so much related together. But I'm interested to know how you met or know Sri Bhagwana, and can you tell us a little bit about his belief? And I think there's Amo Bhagwana as well. So can you tell us a little bit more, because I have very little knowledge of them.
Yes, I mean, in future, I'd love to do another presentation on them, because they did save my life. Like, I'm getting emotional. They're like my spiritual mum and dad now. And in 1989, Sri Bhagavan, Sri Amma is his wife, and Sri Bhagavan, they had a school in India, and the children had revelations. They were about 9 and 10 years old. One was a Muslim child. One was a Hindu child, a child raised in Hindu, and one was Christian. I might have mixed up the religions. I'm sorry if I haven't got some of the details right. These children started to have mystical experiences. They were having connections to what was going on for their family, who was far away from the school, so they could know what their mother was doing. So he started to realize that that school was based in a part of India that is where people have become enlightened over thousands and thousands of years. I'm talking about periods of 20,000 of years, not tens of thousands, but thousands and thousands of years. It was a mystical area. And the children then said that Sri Bhagavan was to establish a global school. So Sri Bhagavan and Sri Amma Sri Amma is not the teacher of the teachings. She's more a transmitter of the energy. And Sri Bhagavan does most of the speaking. Sri Amma speaks sometimes, but they send a phenomena, I can't even say that word, but it's an energy that's connected to the great compassionate light. And they use it, it's called Diksha, but Diksha within the Hindu traditions is just blessing. It's called Diksha, and that phenomena actually helps people to become enlightened. It doesn't happen like that. Some of the people from 1989 slowly started to become awakened. And now, since last year, they've become enlightened. So they've started to get thousands of people enlightened, mostly in India, but also around the world. So Sri Amma Bhagavan, their university is in Chennai, out in the country of Chennai, and they have another campus at Neeman, which is a couple of hours from their temple. They have a temple. So they have like several campuses where they do spiritual work. And they have got students in 90 countries or more globally. And all of those students come from all different walks of life. I'm not sure if we have Baha'i people. We might have members of the Baha'i faith who do follow Sri Amma Bhagavan, because Bhagavan believes there is no belief. He teaches what I discovered through my near death. We create whatever we believe is what we experience. So if you grew up Christian, that's important. That's an important part of your growth. And if you change that, like I was born Catholic, I follow Christ still, but I explore Sufi work. I explore, of course, Hindu practices through my teacher, Sri Amma Bhagavan, and I explore a lot of different spiritual work. So that's part of my belief system, and that's important. But eventually what Sri Amma Bhagavan teaches, that you won't only have belief, but you'll have what one of the readings said at the beginning of our devotion. It's like you will see what you can't see at this level of consciousness. You will see above it to the magnificence of this universe. So Sri Amma Bhagavan doesn't have any particular religion. However, he does use a lot, because he's come through the Indian country, he uses a lot of Hindu ancient practices, homas and other things, and processes. And his work will get you connected to God through your version of God. So he connects me to Christ, or whoever I'm working with, which is often Christ. I connect to Christ. But he can connect to many divine beings, because his goal is to help us to go through whatever belief system we have to become enlightened, which is to see that great source of life, oneness that connects us all. We're no longer separate. We're connected to it while we're still here on earth. You don't have to die. You don't have to die to experience oneness. You can experience here that you are connected. And all religions teach oneness, what Bhagavan teaches. So he definitely celebrates all religions. So Ahmed, I can talk for hours on it, so I try not to go on and on, but they're amazing for me.
Thanks. Do you have to pay for any schooling that you go?
Yes, you can. And there's free, I'm trying to think of what their free stuff. We have a lot of Diksha meditation people that do free meditation. And then some of the courses we have available as well to experience the courses. And I'm trying to think what else we have. Because a lot of it is experiential. They transmit the energy. So we have teachers from Japan and Brazil. They have stuff on YouTube all the time. And they're just getting you to experience the divine. So I can share some of those in the WhatsApp so people can have a look on YouTube. I'm a bit of a YouTube junkie, so I know more of the YouTube links for the people in all the different countries.
Yes.
So I can share some of those that might be interesting to experience it.
So a meditation wise is like Sufi meditation, or what sort of?
No, it's very hard to just explain. It's a bit weird too, because they just sort of transmit the energy through the screen. So maybe Christella, like Reiki, you sort of send the energy. And eye diksha, so they're just looking. Traditionally in Hindu traditions and others, the teacher used to transmit. Jesus did this too. He transmits the energy through the eyes. You see those pictures of Jesus, like when he's just got the light coming through his eyes. So it's like that, like they're transmitting the energy through the eyes. And I teach, if you know, that's how I first started with my work, but that's not exactly the same. It's sort of connected, but the Diksha is a different sense of, it's more like connected to transmitting energy and similar to Reiki and like energy healing.
I better stop asking more questions and let others. But I also believe that the whole universe is connected to each other. Everything in the universe is connected.
Or a giant switchboard with just lights.
We're all connected.
Yes.
You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angela. It's a topic that I was very much interested a long time ago when I was in Africa, maybe 40 years ago. I read, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
I read some article by Dr. Raymond Moody. And probably he was one of the pioneers in this research. He's a medical doctor himself. And while I was investigating the Baha'i faith, I was also investigating these mystic things. And recently, I was listening to his video where he mentions that the near-death experience is the experience of the individual who is dying and then he or she is coming back, right? But he was studying, and there were many examples, anecdotes, and real cases where when someone is dying, someone who is a loved one along with that person is also experience that death, their journey into the death and coming back is they are accompanying spiritual experience, which is again fascinating. And sometimes people can think, what's wrong with Siva? I've become a little bit crazy. I thank you for this, and hope we will have more discussions about it. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Can I ask, Siba, why is it that you're crazy? Why do you think people think you're crazy? I didn't understand why they would think you're crazy.
No, because some of these things, to me, it denies rationality because there is no, sorry, I didn't put my screen. There is no tangible evidence for this. And when you talk to people and say these stories, then they get, they become, because sometimes I have been talking to dogs and my wife will be laughing at me when I tell the story. So I have experience of talking to animals, and sometimes I talk to the trees and birds and things like that. But when I tell these stories, So I only choose people who can listen to the story. I don't just publicly say the story, but here I am telling the story in a public forum. That's why I said not everyone is going to believe you. And then if you are passionate about it, then they will think that, oh, something has gone wrong with me. Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that, Siva. When my mum died, people started coming up to me while I was still tender, and they just told me about their parents' death. And I was confused. I thought, I'm the one that's lost my mum. Why are you talking about your father who died 20 years ago? But it's because we deny, as a collective, we deny this other world because we're still in so much pain about losing that person. And so we just choose to stop talking about it. And some cultures, you're not supposed to talk about dead people. You're supposed to do a non-verbal ceremony to honor them. But the most healthy cultures are ones that talk about their dead people. They're the most vibrant. Like if you think about Day of the Dead, they go to the cemetery and they drink and they dance with their dead ancestors. Or it's just, I found it easier for the mystical stuff because people kept telling me their stories, and then I started to realize people need to speak about this stuff. And I also get people like Dr. Peter Fenwick to say, well, this is a normal, regular scientist, because Brian Weiss can be written off by some people, especially when you go into past lives. But Dr. Peter Fenwick is saying that the psychological impact of death is so valuable that we need to teach people how to talk about it, and children, because this is hurting our people. And his experience with near-death experiences was that the brain actually changed. So we're missing out on an opportunity. So people like him, he's more mainstream science. That's why I find resources like him, because that helps these people that think you're crazy and you go, well, this guy's actually a neuropsychiatrist and he's researching it because it has an important psychological impact on our culture. And that's my 2 cents there.
And one other point that you mentioned about Tiksha, and probably because we use, that's an Indian word, it's something similar to anointing or baptizing. You know, when we say Jesus was baptized and they put the water and put the rod on, or something similar to that. But whatever the process involved, the physical process involved, if you remove that there is a spiritual force that is being transmitted between one to the other. And whether it is by your eyes or with your hand or with your, it is by your thought, you can create this energy or this force which will act upon the other bodies. So that is what, just because Ahmed was asking about this. But Diksha is a word that is like anointing or baptizing or similar to that. Thank you. And now I think Jung is
patiently waiting.
Hello, Angela.
Hi, Jung.
Thank you for your talk. Your talk is very interesting, and I read some of your notes about yourself, and one of the notes that I want to share with you, and probably Father Michael Fallon will need his help too. You say you encourage others to learn how to listen to your inner voice, while also inviting and creating space to share yourself with others and experience true connections. The thing that when we listen to the inner voice, how do you know that is the inner voice from yourself or from other forces outside your body that inject the inner voice into the person? Just like just example, Father Michael Phelan probably know about this, exorcism. If you see somebody who been haunted by ghosts, whether you believe it or not, we study science, we believe in science, where we also see phenomena that relating to the other forces outside of person body. So whether you believe in exorcism, and this another one is the second note, you say people die in a negative state. Not everybody can have a positive state of dying, because just like an army soldier, he got a bullet. So he died instantly. He couldn't even see God in front of him. So when he died, if God take his soul into somewhere else, it's not fair. Because he said, well, I didn't have time to look at Virgin Mary or God in front of me before I get killed, because there's another enemy right in front of him and give him a bullet. So that is the second idea that we have to think about. And the other one is power of prayers. When I got taken to somebody who died on a deathbed, I will bring a rosary bead, and a green scapula, and the pictures of Saint Michael the Archangel and Saint Raphael, and I will pray for them. I will be like a soldier. I will stand in front of their body, and I try to withdraw them from death, because I will challenge both sides, whether the sky, the paradise, or the earth. And obviously, because the person is a human being, I will try to save him or her to stay with us a bit longer, whether I might be acting in selfishness or because I love them too much, let them go to heaven, or we actually don't know where they're going. So therefore, we have to offer power of prayer, and we believe in miracle. So just like in your case, it's like a miracle to me. And the people who send you back on earth is not actually the people who send it, but maybe your friends have been praying for you. The friends on earth, they love you, so they stay and they pray for Angela. You see, you now don't know who helping you, because you're like in the middle of two forces. So you're in the middle.
Yeah, I love that image of the heaven and earth, Jung. When I passed, there was I could say a symphony. There was a world of people praying for me. I had India, I had friends from all different states in Australia, different prayer groups. My friend ran into someone on the street who didn't know me and said, I'll pray for her. I had more prayers than I think anybody I've ever met. So you're right, there was a chorus of people, and then I had to do my part, which was saying, being aware that it wasn't my time and the consequence of what I was creating and the people on the other side. So you can look at it heaven and earth, but in my experience, it was this chorus. It was this symphony of non-physical people, me in the physical and my spirit, and my family and friends and strangers and hospital staff. You know, I cannot explain how many miracles each day when somebody came into that room. I had hospital staff that were just incredible. So I saw the world like in layers, not as heaven and earth, because the physical and the non-physical to me are just, well, they're kind of the same, their life. So Jung, back to the exorcism, and you know, Father Fallon can talk on this, and I really believe, because I've had a lot of friends that have had negative energies, and myself, I had negative energies. So sometimes you have to learn what's your voice, and it's not like instant. It can take, in my case, it took about 30 years, because when I was a child, I had negative voices. I was born with negative voices, and it was terrible. And I've had lots of clients and friends who've had similar situations. And think maybe around 30 or so, well, actually, when I met Helen taught me that those negative voices weren't me. So that's a big initiation. You have to be taught that, and you need spiritual help. I believe that. And the biggest thing that Helen taught me was that spirit, your inner voice, will never criticize you or anybody else. It will never say, that's the devil. It will never say, oh, that person is using you. It will never say, you're a horrible person. And it, over the years, what I've found, that inner voice is very quiet, and it doesn't use a lot of words. That's the second piece. That's really important. It's more like a feeling of when you drink something and you just feel this, it's a knowing. Whereas, unfortunately, the inner voice is often confused in our world with, like, a lot of psychics and people. I worked as a psychic, so I know this world. I did tarot reading in Florida. And I heard all of the stories, okay? And it's a lot of story, blah, 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 blah. Your inner voice is a feeling and more simple. It's like when we listen to the music and you feel that person singing and you feel their connection. It's simple. Or when you read the text and you feel something in the text from the divine teachers. So I wasn't sure if Father Fallon wanted to join in there with that, with the inner voice.
I think the best experience to fix somebody with exorcist procedures is to use a Bible and to use a big holy cross, and just, you put it right in front of that person. Because I experienced and I saved that person, I was very strong. You're just like a soldier, you challenge them. So to see which one is stronger, like, this is, incredible. And I think the best way, they're very scared of the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So you read a whole lot of that, and you use a holy cross right in front of them, and they will subdue. They will, like, calm down, and, they will release the boy, the little boy, like 6 years old. They will release the boys. So, I mean, just theory and practice, but it depends on the forces that you are facing with.
Yeah.
So because we are not angels, we're not like have holy power and, like angels or anything, but we try to be compassionate. And the person is not mental illness. It's not a mental crisis. You see something very different there, because sometimes God gives people experience because God just want to teach people how to do things, how to save people, So, because you are the teacher of healing, and I just want to give you a little topic. I know you are very good at that, but you will never know in the future, you might see some cases. And I think my tip is use the Holy Bible and the rosary bead, if you can, and the Holy Cross, and read the Our Father who art in heaven. I'm very scared of that.
Yeah, the Our Father is incredible. Father, did you want to add?
Well,
Lisa wants to say something.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I know a person, it's very difficult. She's very caring. She's lost two people that are very close to her in her life. She's kind of like, how can I say, she's obsessed with death, in the sense that she knows every person in the community, the date that they've died. It's like she's consumed with death than she is with the living.
Yeah.
And I care so much for this person. I'm worried. Now, I know she has to re-examine, how can I say, reframe the way she thinks. I think that's very important. I know you're saying that it's important to talk about death and everything like that, but it's also important to live.
Yeah.
Embrace the living. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I want her to do, to be positive. She's very caring, she's very nurturing, but yeah, I just want to know what to do. We can't force these things. People have to be ready to change. But I want some advice onto how to, deal with this situation, whether to intervene, whether to speak to her or just leave it, because it's been happening for a long time now.
So when you say a long time, is it decades or is it like shorter than that? Because I grew up with Sicilians, so Sicilians always go on about death. I grew up people talking about someone who died 40 years ago, and they still talked about it as if it happened today.
A long time, yeah, decade, yeah.
Okay.
A very long time, yeah. But yeah, everybody she knows, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's sweet. But if I remember, if I forget when somebody has passed away, she's the only person that will remember it, even if she's not close to that person. She'll know the exact date that they've passed.
Yeah.
Like a calendar. But yet she'll know when somebody's birthday is, don't get me wrong, she'll never forget. But she'll know the exact date when somebody's passed away. It's just like...
the weird thing, intuitively, she might be obsessing, but intuitively, she might be just doing, which is an honour system that you're supposed to do on a death day, like a birthday. So every year when my parents' death day is, I typically have a connection to somebody and I'll just see what comes. But you can do prayer. You can say, oh, would you like to pray for that person? Because she might be just trying to remember. And she might not be ready to talk about her underlying anxiety about death, which sounds like she's got it, because I grew up with Sicilians that were constantly terrified of death.
Mm-hmm.
And then my family were dying all the time. So my family was a classic Sicilian example of whatever you worry about will happen, because it did, and worse. So the worst thing and then the worst thing happens. So prayer is something, if she's connected, Lisa, I don't know if she likes it.
She's extremely religious.
So you could say, instead of just talk, oh, would you like to pray for that person? Because when our dead ones die, they still carry energy. Like, for example, my mum was very guilty when she died and frustrated. And I many times just connect to her now. It doesn't have to be her death day. I connect and I pray and I connect and I talk to her. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the dead are trying to get our attention because they die with these unresolved emotions. Going back to what Jung was saying about the soldier who's shot, God's not going to punish him. But if he dies in shock, that energy's still there. And that's what you can pray for, that they're liberated from any suffering, anything. Or you celebrate the good things about them. Like you remember the person and you have a story and you talk about them, because when they're dead, it's only us living talking about them that keeps their good things alive as well. So yeah, because I'm not sure her whole picture, Lisa, but the feeling I get is that sometimes when they're so obsessed, there's an underlying fear of death.
Mm.
And to say, oh, come on, you've got to start living.
Yes, yeah. No, I don't say it that way. It's like absorbed. It's like she's still carrying around some sort of guilt.
Yeah.
I think we need to work on that guilt. We need to find the root cause of that guilt. I'm not sure whether she's getting help but anyway, I just thought I'd get your advice on that. So thank you. Much appreciated.
Another trick with the prayer.
Yeah.
But when I do prayer, I start praying and I talk about the person and I just feel them and I go, oh, what were they like? So I get the person to talk about the person. And then they start talking about the person and the guilt can start to shift. And you also can pray that your friend is liberated from the guilt easily with the grace of God, or however you say it. But as I got them talking about the dead person, that's when the emotions can move. Instead of not talking about those emotions, I feel bad about this, about the person, or, even just sadness. Like I'd feel like I was angry that my parents suffered and I got to experience it in hospital again. So getting them to talk about the person helps that guilt. It might take a few years.
Okay.
The prayer is really powerful because you're focusing on her coming out of that guilt.
That guilt. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just ask, Lisa, have you offered her a CTC session?
No, not really. Actually, I haven't. I can't remember. It's been going on for so long that memory. Yeah. My memory's sort of gone. Maybe I had a long time ago, but yeah. So I can't remember. I probably should, but I'm not sure whether she'd be open to it, but I may give it a try.
Lisa's a therapist as well, so.
Yeah, no, maybe I should. It's a good idea. Yeah, so, yeah. I also can relate to, my mother passed away when I was 13. And my grandmother and my auntie were looking after her. And I didn't get to say goodbye to my mother. I was deprived of that. And I blamed my grandmother and my auntie for a very long time. And I thought it was their fault when it wasn't for many years. It was my mother's. Well, I don't blame my mother, but my mother was trying to protect me.
Yeah.
So that's because I come from a Lebanese background. So, yeah, I was a little bit angry, even though I didn't express it, because I didn't get any counselling or help from after that either. So I lived with that for many, many years. So, yeah. And physically, as you were describing before, it took a toll on my body because I have epilepsy and everything like that. So I'm a bit of an example of what it can do to your physical well-being, so to speak. Yeah, if you don't deal with issues like that.
Yeah.
But she comes to me spiritually.
Yeah, that's the thing. She can be with you.
Yeah.
You weren't there at the moment. I wasn't there at the moment of their passing. And I think I wouldn't have coped if I saw them both. I don't think I would have. I think psychologically I would have been too disturbed. I think I was protected, but I was there right up until the end, and then I was removed. And then all this other people came. And for I think 10 years I was like, what was all that about? And then I went, you wouldn't have coped if you saw that last breath. You wouldn't have coped, Ange. So it's interesting how we make up stories about that moment as well.
Yeah.
Zore has a question.
Yes. Thank you for your talk, beautiful talk. But I just liked you to not summarize it a little bit about how you healed. Was that you said that because of prayers you healed, or Or is that yourself, that you taught yourself to heal your body, the physical body healed by the spiritual spirit? Or
it was a combination of my teachers in India. They did a lot of energy work while I was in hospital. The prayers were like the combustion, the fuel that kept me here. They literally kept me here with their prayers. And then out of hospital, it was me and the self, what I said in the talk about realizing I had created the misery. I took responsibility. And then I used my movement to start moving my body. So I do belly dance, I do gentle movement, I do kind of yoga, but it's my Angela Dance with Angela yoga, and meditation. And my teachers from India did the Diksha. So it was the movement that was gently just helping me to walk again. And then I used some of my teaching through Helen to breathe, because my lungs were destroyed. So I don't breathe in the same way now, and it doesn't really matter. I still dance. So the recovery was a combination of every single thing, all the gifts that I've been given this life. But definitely if I didn't have those prayers while I was dying, I was shown that I would have been worse. My body would have been more disabled. But right now, a lot of what my physical body recovery is my dance and my movement work and breathing and the Diksha. So there's a lot of things that went into the whole reconstructive surgery after the cancer. And I forgot, I did immunotherapy with the medical system because I was too sick for chemotherapy after they took out the cancer. So I just happened to have this brilliant oncologist, and she went against all the other doctors, and she said, no, we're going to do immunotherapy because I have a genetic mutation in my family. So the immunotherapy I responded so well to that they didn't need to do any other medical intervention. So I still have a question today, whether if I didn't do immunotherapy, I would still be here. I asked my guidance at the time I got that I had to do the immunotherapy, which we paid for from the government. In Australia doesn't pay for immunotherapy with ovarian and uterine cancer. So I paid for that as well. But even for the cancer, that immunotherapy healed the cancer. My physical body was so disabled. I actually had to restore it by learning how to move. I got bursitis in my shoulders, and I had to learn how to use my body again and breathe again. So that was separate to the cancer. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you have movement. I'm a big proponent of movement.
Yes, I admire you for being so strong and healing yourself. You try to heal. But what I was also going to say, that as a Baha'i, we believe that death is a messenger of joy. We don't need to be afraid to die because we feel that the other world is better than this world. But we are also, every living has to, struggle for living. You don't need, because it's a better world there, to kill yourself. You have to you have come to this world, or you have given a chance to live in this maybe 100 years or 80 or whatever years. You have to make the best. But you shouldn't, when the time comes, because every physical living, the material, we are made of all these things, we have to die anyway. And there is nothing to be afraid when the time comes. Of course, we always have a sadness for loss, which is any loss. And then a life loss is always hard. And everybody has experienced a loss. Everybody in their life lost somebody very dear to them, but it's a part of living. Everything comes and goes one day. But I feel that going to the next world is our journey. We have to go through it, but we have to go gracefully. But I admire you for standing for your life to keep it as long as you can. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Angela, I just wanted to thank you for a beautiful presentation, and your response to Jung's question was so beautiful. And to me, the thing you said to me was to listen to your body, to listen to your inner self. Now, it's true, as was pointed out, that there can be different voices coming from here, but by their fruit you'll know them. And if I listen to one voice and I become more gentle, more generous, more thoughtful, more humble, well, keep listening. But if I'm listening to the other voice and I'm becoming more bitter, less helpful, then don't listen to it. But I love the way you kept focusing on that, not external help so much as what you learned, I think, if I've understood you correctly, Angela, to listen to because we're all agreeing, God is love and he's pouring love into your heart. So why don't we listen to the heart? But thank you very much.
Thank you, Father.
Any other questions?
I think Faith is waiting for a while.
Anis is called. Ahmad.
Donia is first. I think he wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Angela, for your talk. And I'm so sorry. I was late. I was late for the meeting. I was sleeping. Today I had to deal with a very sort of sad time. I thought was quite depressed today, but I think first thing I got a call was from a lady who knew my mum very well, and I'm connected with her so well, so strongly, and still to my mum. So she told me something today about her health, and that I just collapsed. I just thought, no, I can't lose you. I've already lost my mum. So that's why I was actually in bed all day today, because I was sad about this very thing. And I posted on Facebook today that death is at the door, and I don't know, it was sort of like, but like, you know, in our, I don't know thoroughly about our culture and the depth of the ceremonies around death and stuff like that. I'm still learning, but I do know that where my mum comes from, death is a very much a big part of life, although in a dark sense. So there's a lot of fear and witchcraft back in the day, and still they're starting to come back in as well. That's at the Torres Straits on Murray Island, where my mother was born. But when the London Missionary Society came there and was brave enough to came ashore with the, you know, very ferocious looking men and women there to greet them, you know, basically we were 2 generations ago, we were eating people. And but they, you know, brought the light, and since then we call it the coming of the light. So it changed a lot of that around. So a lot of that occult ways of in our lifestyles had changed from that point on. Even my grandfather, who had inherited the teachings of Malo, which is the occult god, that he rejected it. He rejected it and chose the light instead of those that deathly kind of, you know, practice and rituals that we would use. Anyway, so you brought up with it. You brought up with death at the door all the time. And I remember when I was a little girl and someone had passed away. It was my uncle, actually. He committed suicide, my godfather. And the tree was right in front of our house down across the football at the beach. And then there was a lot of wailing, and it was going on for weeks. It was going on for like a whole week. Not weeks, but does take a long time, does take weeks to go through the process, the funeral process. And I just didn't understand why everyone was crying. You know, I thought my godfather's passed away, but they're just crying, and it was so sad that I just broke down into tears. I was sitting there as a little girl, just heaving in tears and crying, you know, because of the amount of sadness that was there. But they really do take it really seriously, and I just wish that we would just move on from that too. You know, when my mum died, we were in the same room because they have to move on as well. And I don't know what happens when you commit suicide though, but I've had those thoughts as well. I do tend to think of those sort of things. But when mum died, I was in the room with her. She did the looking up and looked at each person, smiled, and then put her head back down again. And we could sense that her time was near, so I called in on the family to do that. But when she passed away, I was sitting there, and my friend called and said, come out, duck out for a quick snack. We'll have a quick bite to eat and you can go back to the hospital. She was in the hospice. And mum heard me on the phone say that. And then like she was holding on. And then when I just got out, went around a table to get my bag. And I said to her, Mum, I'm going to go out, have a quick lunch, come back. She wasn't in the point state where she wasn't now not responding. She was just shut down and, you know, she's going through the thing. She did say at one point say the door is open. She just looked up and she said, the door is open, the door is open, the door is open.
We talk about doors.
Yeah, and then she went back down again. Anyway, when I did that, she just stopped breathing. And I was like, you stopped breathing, and I wanted to rush to her, but I couldn't. It was like there was this force there that said, you know, you already said goodbye, Mum's saying goodbye now or something. You just can't interfere right now. You have to stay back. And I just stood there, and it went silent, and that was it for that. So yeah, I feel like they have to let go too. Yeah, we have to let go as well. But I did have a question now, but I forgot what it is. I might have to ask that in a message, or if I can please talk to you sometime, Angela, because I feel like I'm always close to death in that way. And you know, when I was asked to leave home when I was 15. When I was 16, someone who's looking after me got killed in an accident as well. So when I ran up I had to identify him in the hospital. The machine was keeping him alive. And I called out to him that I love you. And the nurse said, he can't hear you. His brain is dead. You know, that machine is keeping him alive. I was so angry, but I just looked at him. I screamed in his ear how much I loved him. And he squeezed my finger with all his strength, the last bit of ounce of his energy that he could muster. He squeezed my finger, you know, and but I was suicidal at that point in life. And now I just think, you know, sometimes I wonder how I can, I'll leave it there. I can't think of anything else. That was all a bit emotional. I'm so glad that we had this topic because I had to deal with it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Faith is from Thursday Island. She is a good friend of ours. Thank you, Faith, for coming and talking to us.
Thank you, Siva. So good to see you. Thank you.
I have to apologize from Faith that because Persian language has got he and she as one word, and we all mix them up. So I said he, but it's really she. So it makes it up. I'm wondering whether I can ask or just talk, because I think we got into a kind of a negative mood. But perhaps maybe if I say, because we probably know that I'm a Baha'i and believe in Baha'i faith. So to say a little bit about what Baha'i faith believes in life and death and things like that. And the best thing is a book by Abdul Baha, the grandson of Baha'u'llah, which became successor. And he wrote a book called Some Answered Questions. And an American lady asked some questions about these things, about life and belief in other topics. And that is collected as a book called Some Answered Questions. And Abdullah talks about life and passing, death, and help from above and things like that. I just want to add a little bit about it so that go into a positive mood, and then maybe ask you whether you accept these sort of things, whether you like the concepts. Abdullah says that whatever is metaphysical, when we are in this physical world, it's difficult to grasp, to understand it. So spirit, soul, and these sort of things are not easy to understand. So he says that the only way to understand these things is using metaphors. And he uses the metaphor of being in the womb of the mother. And he says that when you are in the womb of the mother, you don't need those arms or legs and eyes there. And but what's the purpose of those things growing in the womb? So he says that the purpose is you grow those things because you need them in the world after the womb of the mother, which is this world, this physical world. So in the same sense, he says that when we want to move on to the worlds above, we have to grow those spiritual needs, those spiritual limbs, arms, legs, and eyes, in order to move into that world, because we need them in that world. Yeah. So he says that spiritual attributes, these are those limbs, human attributes. Those are limbs, eyes, feet, and ears of the need that we have in the next world. Yeah. And he also says that all the worlds are the sense of place has no meaning, because, for example, when he says that when the baby is in the womb of the mother, that baby still is in this physical world. Yeah. So, but it's not also in this physical world because it's covered up by the womb and is limited by the womb. So he says that the next world also is with us. We are all those people that have passed away are with us. And we are just limited by this physical world. And when we pass away, that physical boundary is removed and we move into that above world. Yeah. So that becomes very nice to grasp, because it says that everything is the same. I can't use the place, but everything is there. Yeah. And there are limits that prevent us to understand them, see them. And he uses the word concourse on high for people that are holy and passed away. And then he says that these people help humans in this world. And he says that all the inventions that humans have discovered is caused by intervention of these people concourse on high, the spirits in concourse on high, that have passed away, and they help us. So parents, for example, help us to grow these spiritual needs that we have in order to be ready for passing on to the world above. Like when a baby grows in 9 months, legs and arms and eyes and ears, in order to use them in this world. So we are the purpose. I think the purpose of life for us is to grow these things. At the same time, we are created by God. So God, in one of his Baha'u'llah's writing, he says that I love your creation, hence I created thee, and I love you to worship me. So our purpose of life for a Baha'i is to worship God and develop these spiritual things, spiritual attributes, in order to be able to pass on to the other worlds of God. So I'm wondering whether do you kind of agree with this sort of concept that we are in a progress?
You have talked so much.
Too much.
And then you are asking me whether I agree or not. This is not the time to. Anyway, I just wanted to this reading that we read. Sorry to interrupt. What is it, Ahmed? This is from Quran. This is the first time I read this. It says, Allah fully takes away the souls of the people at the time of their death, and of those who do not die in their sleep. Then he withholds those on whom he had decreed death, and sends others back up to an appointed term. What does that mean?
So I guess everyone goes. I mean, everyone passes. There's nobody that has not passed, and nobody. I mean, there's nothing that we can do. This is condition of creation, that we are integrated beings and will pass away. And if our time has not come back, like what has happened to Angela, so
I wanted to ask whether Angela, does she feel that this is what in the Quran said is what has happened to her and all those people who had this near-death experience?
I think that's one. For me, the passage has many meanings, because also you can think about it when you go to sleep, you're dying, your consciousness is dying, and then God decides your consciousness is God when you wake up to come back to wake consciousness. So there's several meanings, because it could also, this might be controversial, could be reincarnation, and it does mean that at the appointed time that you have. So there are things that you are in control of and that you're not in control of, but your soul, from my experience, it knows when you live, when your birth is and when your death is. And then if it's not your time, it's not your time. I do agree, Siva, that it's inferring that if you're not meant, if it's not your time to die, you will come back. Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
Then it gets complicated, because we could go for another long time about who's God. Are you God? Is that God outside or is it inside? Which God?
I definitely can see that, Angela, that because of this experience, you have changed and you have brought out the spirituality out of yourself, and developed it. So perhaps it wasn't your time. It was a cause to for you to develop those limbs and arms and eyes that one needs for the next world.
Yeah, and for this part of my life, before I actually die physically, yeah, definitely. That's a great way to describe it, because my eyes feel different. My limbs feel different even. Like I could make it very physical, that metaphor. My body feels different because it's not the same what it was.
I guess when we align ourselves with the needs of the spirit, we become more spiritual, we become holy.
Father, Tracy has left, but she said in the chat, I like Father Michael's ideas around which voice to listen to.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, we have a first-time visitor, Libius Sardanikova. Could you please say something, because we don't know who you are. We haven't seen
The
your
bush
face.
is a friend of mine.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Can you see? Yeah. Hi. How are you? Sorry. Yeah. Angela is a friend of mine. She invited me to this group because I was very much interested about the near-death experience, as I have issue with the death. So I just wanted to say that I was there next to Angela when she was in her critical situation, and we just met through the spiritual work through Sri Amma Bhagavan. And just few months before that, and I felt very connected to her. And so when the story, like when this story happened, and when it was big shock for me, because I felt like, oh my goodness, I just met this great person. I feel really connected, and now you're telling me that she's getting cancer and we don't know what's gonna happen. So I was very disturbed by that news. And then through that process, I had to accept it, and I had to accept that the fact that it's her decision to make. I was also praying a lot, as many other people from the community, but yeah, it was very interesting and very interesting journey. So I was just very glad that Angela invited me, and to hear a little bit more depth. And I'm so grateful to be here and to listen to all your comments. And yeah, so that's about.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and joining us. And please do come. Every week we have this. And we have one of the friends, a teacher who came and gave a talk. He asked a question: how was it when you first time died? He asked this question: how was it when you died first time? And we were all puzzled. And then he said, leaving this world and going to the next world or next life we call the death, you were in the womb of your mother and you left that world and came into this world. That was also similar to what you are going through this. So how was your first death? Now, Lisa was mentioning that this friend, she remembered the birthdays and the date of death. Probably they are all birthdays, or they are all
all days. That's nicely put.
Yes. Anyway, if there are any, maybe if there are no more questions or comments, we can close.
Yes.
I guess we can say that we are in the womb of this world at the moment, because we're living in this physical world.
Yes.
Thank you, Father Michael Fallon, Angela.
Yes.
Others say, you're lucky, Angela, you only near death experience only once. So you come back, very happy and ever after. But some people, they near death experience 3 or 4 times or 6 times. And I pray for them, keep them going for 8 years more. And then the last time the doctor wanted to pull the life support system off them, I asked the doctors to leave the life support system extra 3 days. And finally I couldn't save him because God wanted him more than anything else. So I just let God take over.
Yes, the prayers are very, very powerful. And as Jung said that, what is that? The Lord's Prayer. You said that to keep saying the prayers and it will have some effect. And I wanted to share this one. Can you see this on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what Baha'u'llah said. Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, as intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul, and attract the hearts of all men. Whoso reciteth in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God, the scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the words uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom. So the power of the word of God, prayers is immense. The scattering angels will take and spread it all over the. So keep saying the prayer, Yung, the Lord's Prayer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's so.
Yes.
That's.
Yes. So we can.
Is that about it?